borrowers who had never paid $1 on their student loans. This subcommittee examined a number of these problems earlier this year. Despite increasing federal spending on education, our students are not getting ahead academically. In fact, despite record spending, they have lost ground compared to other nations around the world. The latest National Assessment of Education Progress scores shows that 1/3 of eighth graders nationwide are reading below the basic level. Student test scores overall are below the 2019 levels, in evidence that students have not recovered from the pandemic despite $200 billion in federal COVID education spending. This was on top of annual federal spending for education, including almost $19 billion for Title I schools. Most alarming, the scores reveal a widening achievement gap. In reading, for example, lower performing students in the 4th and the 8th grade scored lower than students back in 1992, more than 30 years ago. Students deserve better. But ever-increasing federal spending has not proven to be the solution. Just earlier this year, one expert told the subcommittee that education spending per pupil has more than tripled in real terms since Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty began back in 1965. More spending, yet worse results. Students need reading, writing, math, and critical thinking for everyday activities to succeed in their jobs and to make life's big decisions. Too many schools, encouraged and facilitated by federal funding, have let things like social justice advocacy and divisive issues crowd out the focus on teaching students and the core subjects. Thankfully, some states have pursued choice options for students whose traditional public schools have not served them well, including through charter schools. Department data shows that as of 2021, public charter schools enrollment had more than doubled from a decade before, growing by about 2 million students, while enrollment at traditional public schools declined by 4%. I look forward to hearing from you, Madam Secretary, about increased support for charter schools. However, this administration sees value in reassessing our approach so we can do better for all students around the country. It's also recognized a limited role for education. After all, only about 1 in 10 education dollars come from the U.S. federal government. Education fundamentally remains within the purview of the states and the local communities. At the same time, I should note that we can still make priority key areas such as support for schools that are near federal military installations and under-resourced schools in rural areas, while limiting the overall federal role. In higher education, there are bright spots with bipartisan support such as Pell Grants, which help lower income students pay for college. The prior administration some way made a broken financial aid system worse, injecting more politics into the student loan program. The disastrous federal loan program is the direct results of the partisan Affordable Care Act, which included a Washington takeover of student loans. As we all know, a Washington takeover of anything is rarely a good idea. The ACA converted the guaranteed loan program into a federally run program. At the same time, members of Congress were told that it would save $60 billion over 10 years. However, in projections released last year, the CBO reported that it expects the government will lose 18 cents on every dollar it lends in 2025. Not a dollar of savings to be had. Thankfully, the Republican-led reconciliation efforts this year seeks to address some of these shortcomings. Against this backdrop, the prior administration put untold amounts of taxpayer resources into executive actions, waivers, running. First, I think we need to acknowledge the situation that the Trump administration had to face on day one, and that was plummeting test scores for our K through 12 students and millions of borrowers who had never paid $1 on their student loans. This subcommittee examined a number of these problems earlier this year. Despite increasing federal spending on education, our students are not getting ahead academically. In fact, despite record spending, they have lost ground compared to other nations around the world. The latest National Assessment of Education Progress scores shows that 1/3 of eighth graders nationwide are reading below the basic level. Student test scores overall are below the 2019 levels, in evidence that students have not recovered from the pandemic despite $200 billion in federal COVID education spending. This was on top of annual federal spending for education, including almost $19 billion for Title I schools. Most alarming, the scores reveal a widening achievement gap. In reading, for example, lower performing students in the 4th and the 8th grade scored lower than students back in 1992, more than 30 years ago. Students deserve better. But ever-increasing federal spending has not proven to be the solution. Just earlier this year, one expert told the subcommittee that education spending per pupil has more than tripled in real terms since Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty began back in 1965. More spending, yet worse results. Students need reading, writing, math, and critical thinking for everyday activities to succeed in their jobs and to make life's big decisions. Too many schools, encouraged and facilitated by federal funding, have let things like social justice advocacy and divisive issues crowd out the focus on teaching students and the core subjects. Thankfully, some states have pursued choice options for students whose traditional public schools have not served them well, including through charter schools. Department data shows that as of 2021, public charter schools enrollment had more than doubled from a decade before, growing by about 2 million students, while enrollment at traditional public schools declined by 4%. I look forward to hearing from you, Madam Secretary, about increased support for charter schools. However, this administration sees value in reassessing our approach so we can do better for all students around the country. It's also recognized a limited role for education. After all, only about 1 in 10 education dollars come from the U.S. federal government. Education fundamentally remains within the purview of the states and the local communities. At the same time, I should note that we can still make priority key areas such as support for schools that are near federal military installations and under-resourced schools in rural areas, while limiting the overall federal role. In higher education, there are bright spots with bipartisan support such as Pell Grants, which help lower income students pay for college. The prior administration some way made a broken financial aid system worse, injecting more politics into the student loan program. The disastrous federal loan program is the direct results of the partisan Affordable Care Act, which included a Washington takeover of student loans. As we all know, a Washington takeover of anything is rarely a good idea. The ACA converted the guaranteed loan program into a federally run program. At the same time, members of Congress were told that it would save $60 billion over 10 years. However, in projections released last year, the CBO reported that it expects the government will lose 18 cents on every dollar it lends in 2025. Not a dollar of savings to be had. Thankfully, the Republican-led reconciliation efforts this year seeks to address some of these shortcomings. Against this backdrop, the prior administration put untold amounts of taxpayer resources into executive actions, waivers, and programs it created without congressional authority to try to cancel loans and make loan payments more generous. It told borrowers that forgiveness was always on the horizon, while also going through the motions to restart repayment. The results, massive confusion for 43 million borrowers who were supposed to begin monthly payments after more than 3 years pause. The confusion in the loan servicing system. Because of the mass confusion that was created under the previous administration, the department estimates nearly that 1 in 4 of these borrowers, more than 10 million people, are in default or late on their payments, putting them at risk of future default. Just 38%, or 16 million borrowers, are in repayment on their current loans. Secretary McMahon, you have inherited an absolute mess in the department, but I hope you can correct the course. You have taken swift action to restore common sense to our college campuses. The department has made clear that all students should be able to access their campuses without fear of their safety, while still allowing peaceful exercise of free speech. Too many students in recent memory have been subjected to severe campus disruption, including at some of our nation's most elite universities. The department has also taken steps to return to the original purpose of Title IX, ensuring that women and girls have equal opportunity to compete in sports. I would also like to thank you and President Trump for your actions to protect women and girls in sports. Madam Secretary, thank you for your department's bold initiative as you carry out the President's America's First agenda. We must consider new approaches to longstanding problems, both for the sake of our students and to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollars. I look forward to working with you and look forward to your testimony this morning. And with that, now I'd like to recognize the ranking member, Rosa DeLauro, for her opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and to you and to the Secretary. My apologies for being late. But I want to thank you, Chairman Adderholt, for holding this critically important hearing on the Trump administration's budget request for the Department of Education. Secretary McMahon, good morning. I welcome you to the House Appropriations Committee for your first budget hearing as Secretary of Education. Public education is deeply important to me. When I was a kid, my mother took me to work with her. She worked in the old sweatshops in the city of New Haven, and I know you know Connecticut. And the conditions there were horrific. Dangerously hot, unsanitary, mostly immigrant women bent over sewing machines trying to pump out the dresses as fast as they could because they were on piecework. If you know anything about the needle trades, you get your finger caught in those high-powered machines. You just pull back, you wrap your hand up, because if you get a drop of blood on the garment, you don't get paid for it. And recognized her madness, the method to her madness, when she asked me to be there every day after school. And what she said to me is, get an education so that you don't have to do this. My dad came as an immigrant from Italy in 1913, was put in the 7th grade. He couldn't read or write the language. They laughed at him, his teachers and his classmates. He left school in the 7th grade and never went back to formal education. He served in the United States military, served on the city council in New Haven, and always was invested in his community. And again, he said to me, get an education. And he said, if you get an education, you can make $10,000 a year. So the whole issue of public education was critical to me and to my parents, as they sacrificed to get me the finest of educations and to allow me to realize my dreams and my aspirations. And that's true of the 9 out of 10 students in our country who attend public schools. And it's true of the stories of pretty much the entire population, of their understanding that what public education means to their lives and how it is the key to success. And I might just say that this budget, in my view, should be described as leaving every child behind. And that is why I strongly oppose your proposal to cut investments in education of our nation's children by $12 billion or 15%. It is clear that your mission is to dismantle our federal investments in the nation's public education. You and President Trump explicitly seek to eliminate the Department of Education, which Republicans have proposed for decades. But let me be clear with you, you will not have the partnership of Congress in your efforts to destroy the Department of Education and eliminate public education in this nation. Not on our watch. We will go over your plans to suffocate your own department and slash our investments in the education of our children and in students hoping to obtain a college degree. But before we discuss next year, I want to talk about what you're doing right now. The American people demand help with the cost of living, but President Trump is not laser focused on the cost of living. He is actually making it worse. He promised to fight for the middle class and working families, but instead put Elon Musk and wealthy billionaires like yourself in charge of the government that is meant to be of and by and for the American people. Madam Secretary, the administration is recklessly and unlawfully freezing and stealing congressionally appropriated funds from agencies, programs, and services across the government that serve the American people. You, President Trump and Elon Musk, are attacking public education to pay for tax cuts you stand directly to benefit from. Congress alone holds the power of the purse. It is right there in the Constitution. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7. Congress, not the president, determines how the taxpayers' dollars are spent. The law of the land is the 2024 budget. We are living in 2025 under a continuing resolution that carries forward the 2024 budget. And that is the law that you are bound to follow. Furthermore, the Department of Education was created by the Congress, and it can only be undone by the Congress. Under your leadership, the department, hundreds of millions of dollars have been frozen, and entire programs have been terminated. Funding for vital research, protection of students' civil rights, and programs that support the recruitment and professional development of effective educators have been terminated. Madam Secretary, if Congress agreed with your determinations that these programs do not deserve funding, we would have decreased the funding for these accounts accordingly. We did not. Nor did we remove funding for the department staff, but you took it upon yourself to eliminate half of the Department of Education's workforce. By recklessly incapacitating the department you lead, you are usurping Congress's authority and infringing on Congress's power of the purse, and you will continue to lose these battles in the courts. You have been blocked from letting DOJ access student loan borrowers' private information, from interfering with local school curricula, from punishing school districts for curricula you disagree with, and from stealing COVID relief aid from states and school districts. And there are many more. For as long as you continue to deliberately and flagrantly defy the law, you will continue to lose in court. But let us be clear about who is losing most of all, and that's the children and the families of this country. The consequences will be felt by students losing access to school psychologists, counselors, and social workers due to your shameful decision to cancel hundreds of grants for mental health services in public schools. These grants were created and funded by a bipartisan basis of this subcommittee and the bipartisan Safer Communities, including a mental health program that I created after hearing how desperately it was needed in schools across Connecticut. We are not talking about hypotheticals of what ifs or worst case scenario. This lawless and cruel destruction has happened and is happening under your watch today. Turning to your budget request for 2026, I want to note that the administration has provided sparse detail about your proposal to cut the Department of Education by $12 billion. We have no idea where that $12 billion is coming from. A central component of your plan for elementary and secondary education is to eliminate 18 unspecified competitive and formula grant programs, replace them with a $2 billion Brock grant to states, yet at the same time, you propose that we provide $4.5 billion less to educate our nation's children overall. A block grant is a cut. All of my colleagues here know that the states cannot afford to pick up the slack. Your visions for students aspiring to access and pay for college is particularly grim. You take away need-based financial aid for 1.7 million students, and you eliminate the federal work-study program, opportunities for more than 500,000 students who need it to help finance their education. They are from working families, middle-class families, vulnerable families, and they work in order to be able to pay for their education. These are students from working-class families. They're working their way through college. You know, some families do not need financial assistance to go to college, but that's not true for the rest. Madam Secretary, in the middle of a cost of living crisis, you are pulling up the ladder for everyone who has not found their way to extraordinary wealth or even enough to simply make ends meet. What will happen if you get your way? What will happen if your department is dismantled and our investments in education vanish? Madam Secretary, your grandchildren, my grandchildren, Elon Musk's grandchildren, President Trump's grandchildren will be just fine. But it's the children and the grandchildren of hardworking Americans will suffer. And they will fall further behind those whose families enjoy enormous wealth and privilege. I do not believe the American people want larger classes, fewer teachers, but that is exactly what you are aiming to deliver. I do not believe students and families want you to turn a blind eye to predatory, for-profit charter schools and colleges. But you appear prepared to continue to let scammers steal the money and the educational dreams of hardworking families and aspiring graduates. I understand the administration is eager to find a way to give yourselves a tax cut, but by doing so and dismantling public education is indefensible. Your actions are lawless, they reek of disdain for public education, and they are hurting the most vulnerable in our nation. Education is not a handout. Education is not waste, fraud, or abuse. As a leading Democrat on the Appropriations Committee, I assure you that I will never stop fighting against this dangerous dismantling of public education, which is undermining and jeopardizing the futures of millions of children in this country. I look forward to your testimony, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member, and I now would like to turn to our witness, Secretary McMahon, and you'll have 5 minutes to deliver your opening remarks. You've submitted written testimony. It will be included in the full record, but we do recognize you and look forward to your comments.
Thank you very much. Chairman Adderholt, Ranking Member DeLauro, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for having me today to represent a department on a mission, its final mission, to wind down the Department of Education responsibly, cut waste, and give education back to the states, parents, and educators, all in a lawful fashion. With your partnership, the fiscal year 26 budget will take a significant step toward that goal. We seek to shrink federal bureaucracy, save taxpayer money, and empower states, who best know their local needs to manage education in this country. We have reviewed our programs and identified spending that does not fulfill the mandate of trust the American people have placed in President Trump. We've reduced a department that was overstaffed by thousands of positions, cut old contracts that were enriching private parties at taxpayer expense, suspended grants for illegal DEI programs, and now are putting forward a budget request that reduces department funding by more than 15%. At the same time, we're working to make American education great again. In our conversations with governors, teachers, and parents across the country, we hear calls for accountability and more local control. That's our goal, to give parents access to the quality education their kids deserve, to fix the broken higher education industry that has misled students into degrees that don't pay off, and to create safe learning environments for our students. We're holding institutions to account when they facilitate discriminatory or hostile environments on campus. A level playing field with limitless opportunity is a vision I think we all can share. Our budget reflects this vision. Its cuts reflect a bureaucracy that is getting out of the way, and its continuations and increases represent smart spending that will help improve student achievement, not serve bureaucratic interests. Our goal is clear: make education better, fairer, and more accountable by ending federal overreach and empowering families, schools, and states who best know the needs of their students. I'm eager to partner with you to make this vision of the future a reality and to ensure every child is part of it. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. And again, we appreciate your attendance here today before the subcommittee. The latest National Assessment of Education Progress report, our results are quite honestly pretty unacceptable. Too many students have fallen behind in basic subjects, and they have not realigned learning loss during the time of the pandemic. For the sake of students and their parents, I appreciate your call for bold change. As we re-examine our approach to education, I think it's important to recognize that we can appropriately limit the federal role in education while continuing support in key areas. As I mentioned earlier, schools near military installations and under-resourced rural schools. Could you talk to us a little bit about the department's plan to refocus on the core educational achievement while reducing the bureaucracy overall?
Sure. Well, I have, thank you very much. And I have really three priorities as the Secretary of Education, and that is to increase school choice, but I really want to focus everything we're doing, our competitive grants, on literacy. I think that is the absolute basis of what we need to do. We want to increase school choice for students so that we don't have children trapped in failing schools. And we want to return education to the states, and that's really our priority. So it's threefold and very simple. Let's focus on literacy. What we're seeing in those scores that you're talking about, Congressman Adderholt, is the failing of our students to learn to read. From first through third grade, or pre-K into third grade, you're learning to read. And after that, you are reading to learn. And if you cannot read, you cannot learn. And that is one of the reasons, I believe sincerely, that we have seen such decreases or failing in our schools, because we are not teaching our children to read. We've lost the fundamental basics. And I want to see our schools return to the science of reading, which focuses on phonics, which focuses on understanding and fluency in reading. Because if we can get that right, I think we're going to see a great deal of improvement in our schools across our country. But we're not doing it. And I think there have been programs that have been tried with the best of intentions, but they've not succeeded. Here we are today with a Department of Education that was really stood up in 1980 by President Carter. We've spent over $3 trillion during that time. And every year, we have seen our scores continue to either stagnate or fall. It is clear that we are not doing something right. We need a change. We need a shakeup. We need to do things differently than what we're doing. And let's get back and focus on what was successful. Let's focus on our public schools as well as charter schools, as well as other schools that can deliver homeschooling. The president is absolutely focused on making sure that children have the right to an education that is best for them, and that parents should be deciding where their children can go to school and get the best education. They should have those opportunities, whether they're private schools, charter schools, public schools, homeschooling. They need to have the choice so that they can succeed. I believe that parents know what's best for their children. I think that parents working with local educators, with local superintendents, can develop those programs for schools which will deliver the best results. The president and I certainly agreed that the best education is that is closest to the child. Who better to know and understand what a child's needs are than that teacher working in the classroom, than that parent in cooperation with the teachers in that classroom to help understand what that child needs. So clearly, my focus is definitely going to continue on bringing education closest to the states. And I, like you, Ranking Member DeLauro, am a product of public school systems. My parents had dreams for me as well. I was an only child, and they really wanted to make sure that I went to college and had the opportunity for the American dream. So I appreciate very much that background and where you were coming from as well. Thank you very much.
Oh, I noted earlier in my comments about 1/4 of the federal student loan portfolio is in default or late stage of delinquency. Borrowers who are very behind on their repayments would be in this category. Only about 4 in 10 borrowers are actually in repayment or current on their loans. And I think we need to be clear the impact of this situation that was set in motion by the previous administration is both individual and corporate. Individuals across the country are at risk of damaging their own credit ratings and going into default. This kind of financial damage can be devastating to countless constituents across the country. And our country is at risk of losing billions of dollars because of the previous administration's disastrous messaging about loan forgiveness and repayment. My time is fading away, but if you could just briefly tell us how the department is facilitating an orderly return to repayment, including directing struggling borrowers to available resources to help them get back on track.
Well, thank you. And I think that is one of the keys. We are directing them through our website, studentaid.gov. They can go and look at the different payment option plans that they can be part of to repay their loan. You're absolutely correct that we have lost hundreds of millions of dollars. I understand that COVID was part of some of those programs. It was right, I think, to take a step back during COVID. But once COVID ended, we should have resumed collection on those payments and voluntary payments. And I do believe that the past administration, with confusing messages that they were sending about loans being forgiven, et cetera, I'm not too sure why anybody would have stepped up and paid if they thought it was going to be forgiven. But we've put a program back on track now. We sent letters on May 5th. We're working through Treasury, through their collection efforts, to make sure that we have programs to collect that money. And I can report that today, since May 5th and those letters going out, we have now collected almost $100 million in back loans, some on a voluntary basis, and then some is we're restructuring the way those folks are going to be repaying their loans. So we're on the right track to,
Okay, thank
to
you.
get that.
My time's expired, and like I said, every member will be recognized 5 minutes. I'm one to understand that there are sometimes the secretary can be finishing a question, and so I won't gavel down exactly 5 minutes, but I would ask you to be respectful of the chairman as I do this, to not go over too much. So when I start tapping, if you could start winding up, I would sincerely appreciate it. With that, Ranking Member DeLauro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just might quickly make this comment, Madam Secretary. The state and local taxes today overwhelmingly pay for education in this country. Madam Secretary, you testify that we should not, quote, spend money without correcting underlying problems. That's what I love about serving on the Appropriations Committee. We're delivering appropriations to correct underlying problems. We have a nationwide psychologist, counselor, social worker shortage in our schools, which is why this subcommittee worked with Secretary DeVos to create new school-based mental health grants, bipartisan grants funded by Congress for years, the very grants that you canceled on the eve of the National Mental Health Awareness Month. What is the, quote, underlying problem you thought we were not correcting when you canceled $1 billion in grants to train and increase school-based mental health professionals nationwide?
Well, thanks very much for that question. I think when we look at mental health nationwide, it undertakes many particular facets. We have to understand in the communities, I do realize that there are shortages of teachers, there are shortages of healthcare workers. But I think what we need to focus on is what are the needs of the community? How can they best be served? And so we want to make sure that we have healthcare professionals in place. But what we were finding was there were a lot of instances where the money was not being used really for healthcare programs. But I think if we are looking at healthcare, we would look more, I think, at funding locally so that those people can be brought in.
Excuse me for interrupting because the chairman has talked about time, but it would then be very happy if you could provide to us, one of the things we can't seem to get any information on is why the programs were canceled, what criteria was used in order for you to say yay or nay to a program. So that information would be enormously helpful. I would just think, I don't know, but I know the state of Wisconsin here had multiple grants canceled that have reduced the ratio of mental health professionals to students by more than 10%. You've not answered the question about the issue of mental health, and that we've got a nationwide problem in mental health, and we've let all these people go. Guilford County, North Carolina, used their grant to help provide mental health services to 1,000 additional students, reducing rates of chronic absenteeism. Did you consider the success of these programs before you canceled them?
Well, they've not been canceled. They are continuing at this point, but they might not be continued as we go forward, and I will get back to you on that.
Well, okay, please do, because these grants, as I understand it, were canceled, as I said, on the eve of the National Mental Health Awareness Day. So, and in Wisconsin, the grants were canceled. North Carolina, there are many, many other examples of grants that were canceled, and we too will look into the that effort. In 2024-2025, Congress appropriated more than $200 million for school-based mental health services grants and the mental health service professional demonstration grants. Are you freezing or withholding funding that Congress appropriated in 2025 for mental health services for students? Do you commit to us to following the law, fully obligating the funding that Congress appropriated for mental health services for students, and to obligate those funds by September 30th of this year? Or are you planning to break the law by impounding congressionally appropriated funds?
Well, I can certainly report to you, Ranking Member, that we are evaluating every single program. We're looking at it very carefully. We are continuing or not continuing some funds as we look at them, and as we go forward in the budget, I am happy to get back to you.
Well,
but
the point is,
a careful evaluation of the programs that are going forward.
With all due respect, this is money that was appropriated. It is in the 2024 budget, which is what we are now dealing with. And so I have to understand from your answer that in fact you are not going to abide, maybe you're not going to abide by the 2024 numbers. So that means that you plan to break the law by impounding congressionally appropriated funds. Yes or no?
We are going to abide by the law.
Then that means, I just want to say, that means that you are going to spend the dollars appropriated by this subcommittee to carry out those programs as directed in the 2024 budget that we are living under for 2025. So that means by September 30th, that money will be expended for all of the programs that are listed.
We will abide by the law.
Okay. Thank you. I'm happy to do that. Will you have a second round, Mr. Chairman?
We're going to try.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Millar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Secretary. Appreciate you being with us today. I, along with Senator Tim Scott, co-chair the School Choice Caucus, and I was really pleased to hear your priorities, your focus on accountability, local control, empowering parents and students. And one of the things that become very clear to me is this need for families to have options. And you've spelled out a number of different options that are available. Can you tell me what you plan to do and any initiatives you might take that would expand options for parents and students?
Well, certainly we are going to support, if you look at the numbers that are in the president's budget, he's also including an increase of $60 million for charter schools. The president absolutely believes, as do I, that the more choice that parents have, the better off the students are. And we've seen that repeatedly in different states. Governor Reynolds in Iowa has talked about how in introducing school choice programs in her state, that public schools have improved. There's competition among the schools. Scores are better when they have the opportunity, to compete, and schools can do what they need, and parents can put students where they know they will thrive. and different, whatever that school program is. I mean, we've looked at different schools. I was talking to Governor Stitt from Oklahoma yesterday, and he was telling me about one of the special schools that they've set up in Oklahoma is relative to, now I forget the exact title, but it was mechanics for airplanes. And he said, look, in my community, this is very, very strong. And so part of the schooling that we are developing for those is to having these students in secondary education already looking at these kind of programs so that when they graduate, they're ready to move right into the economy. So I think we have to reimagine education totally, because look, when I was coming along, when my kids were coming along, everything I said to them was, you need to go to college. You have to have a 4-year college degree in order to get a foot in the door to start your life, to make a good wage. And while I still believe in in higher education for many, many students, I think that's not the right pathway for every single student. And I think we need to focus on the programs in those communities, in those schools, and give local communities the opportunity to develop their curriculum, as I mentioned with Governor Stitt, around what is necessary needs for their community. We'll have more success. We'll have higher graduation rates. We'll have students stay in school when they can focus on subjects that are of interest to them. And I just think that that's going to be incredibly important as we move forward in how we look at our education landscape.
Thank you very much. And I want to turn to the influence of the Chinese Communist Party in our educational system. 2 years ago, I asked your predecessor, Secretary Cardona, if he was aware of efforts by the Chinese Communist Party to influence the U.S. education system, and I was surprised. He told me he wasn't really aware of that. Are you familiar with the efforts by the CCP to influence American education?
By things I have heard, yes. And one of the things that we are stressing very, very much under Section 117 is to make sure that these colleges and universities are complying with the law and reporting to us when they have received donations over the $250,000 minimum. We found that there are many that are not doing that. One of the things that we put in place is to make sure that as universities are looking at their hiring practices, what kind of vetting are they doing with those particular professors that they're bringing in, or students that might be coming in on campus? What can be that effect and that influence? But it is very important, I think, for us to know how much money is coming in from foreign countries.
Thank you. And last year, our Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party released a report, CCP on the Quad, and it detailed how federally funded research at universities has advanced the CCP's military goals. We also highlighted concerns about how many American universities have joint institutes in China where they partner with Chinese universities. As a result of this scrutiny from our committee, UC Berkeley, University of Michigan, Georgia Tech, and Oakland University have all ended these joint institutes. And there are a number more that could be ended. I'm asking if you would consider leading an effort across the administration to work with those remaining universities with joint institutes to close them so we don't have continued efforts by our, in many cases, taxpayer dollars helping with the Chinese military industrial complex funding.
Well, we certainly are investigating a lot of those universities who do still have those ties, and I would like to work with you to make sure that we are operating our universities in the best interest of the people of the United States and our government.
Thank you. And I'm sure the Confucius Institutes are on your radar screen. Sometimes their efforts morph into something very similar called the Confucius Classroom. Is that something that we can work with you on to prevent that malign influence into our K-12 system?
Sure, I'd like to and enjoy working with you on that.
Thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Milnar. Ms. Boyer.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And again, as I promised, I came back. The President instructed you to take all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the Department of Education. Did you check with your counsel? or legal advisors as to whether or not you had authority to accomplish that request?
The president's executive order and his direction to me was to take those steps to lawfully shut down the Department of Education and to work with Congress to do that.
I understand what you said, but his quote was, "Take all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the Department of Education." It was not, as you suggest, from the reading of his quote and his executive order, inclusive of consistent with the law. But that's your interpretation of what he said?
I would like to look at it again and get back to you, but I do believe he said to lawfully close down the Department of Education. At least let me rephrase and say that is clearly his direction to me. We both know and understand that the Department of Education cannot be closed unless Congress votes to do that. So my goal, when I came on board, and he asked me how I thought we could do that, and I said my goal would be to work with Congress so that we could have transparent programs. I would like to, at the end of this program that I'm working on, as we try to bring up our test scores and work with our local states to bring education back to the states, to make sure that states have best practices and the tools to deliver those best practices. And so by sharing them with Congress, I would hope that Congress would look at them and say, you know, eventually, I believe that this is going to be in the best interest of our students. This is not taking away funding. This is having funding go to the states for, you know, for Title I-A, for IDEA. That is continuing. It may flow through in a different tranche.
Okay, as you know, we have time constraints.
Okay.
I hear you. Having said that, does the budget that is submitted to the Congress of the United States for fiscal year 26 include full funding for those programs that the Congress has authorized and directed be established and carried out?
Well, as you know, Congressman, we are dealing with the skinny budget at this point. Not all of the programs have been put into the full budget of the president, but I can tell you that the Title I-A funding and IDA funding is fully funded under the
Let me ask
last
you
budget.
about
Yes.
that. I have a table that shows me about $4.3 billion were established for those programs and are going to be, those 18 programs to which I think you refer, are going to be put down into a single grant of $2 billion. Can you tell me, now that's $2.3 billion, that's about a 55-60% reduction. What will not be done, excuse me, is A, accurate that we've taken 4.3 down to 2.8 or 2 billion? Is that accurate?
Well, let's be clear about one thing, though. The Title I-A funding and IDA funding is in full.
Correct.
So they're not part of the 18 that is being compressed. So the 18 programs that you mentioned
Yes.
are really, they will be compressed into $2 billion, which will operate like a block grant to the states, where I think they can best be utilized by understanding what is needed in the states and the communities.
So when you say we're not, I understand Title I, but almost always when we talk about block granting programs, we make very, very substantial substantive cuts in the availability of resources for the programs that are covered. That is my reading of 18 programs going into, which we are now spending $4.3 billion on, down to $2 billion. It seems to me that is eliminating very substantially, without authority from the Congress, programs that the Congress has enabled and directed be undertaken for the American people.
Well, let's look at it this way, if we could. We are eliminating regulations and red tape that a lot of these different grants had with them, and therefore they're going to require less compliance with regulations in order to fulfill the mission of those grants.
Madam Secretary.
If I could just finish this one thing.
Sure.
One stat that I think was impressive to me was that 47 cents of every dollar that goes in for these kinds of programs is spent on regulatory compliance. We want to get rid of that. Let the money flow to the states, and I think we're going to see more money available in the states with less red tape.
My time has expired, but I came here in '81. President Reagan talked about getting rid of fraud, waste, and abuse. The deficit was increased by 189% under President Reagan. Fraud, waste, and abuse, nobody on this panel, on this side or that side, wants to have fraud, waste, and abuse. We all agree on that. That is not what you're cutting out when you take 55% or 60% reduction in 18 programs. I guarantee you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary, for being here this morning with us. Let me start by saying it's amazing to me that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to defend an agency that I believe has become an abject failure. If you look at the stats of students across the United States, the reading scores have plummeted, the math scores have plummeted, we are not doing well in science, and we have to do something different. You mentioned Oklahoma and Governor Stitt, and in Oklahoma, we have certainly adopted charter school programs and have expanded school choice, and I think it's important to talk about why school choice is so important. You have students attending Good Shepherd, which is a school in Oklahoma that is focused on making sure that our students with developmental disabilities, particularly with autism, have the opportunity to attend a school that meets their needs. You have Mission Academy, which is a school that helps children who are battling substance abuse. It's a very unique environment for them to be able to leave a public school, in many cases that they've been in, and be able to get a specialized education, but also address the issues of substance abuse with these young people. So I applaud what you're trying to do. I think it's important that we look at the results. That's what we're looking for here. As a mother myself who decided to send my children to a private Catholic school because I wanted them to get a faith-based education, that was my choice. And I appreciate that. And it is frustrating to me to hear my colleagues, talk about how great education is when we know the numbers say something very different. So I want to start with that. I applaud your efforts to return education to the states and reduce the bloated DC bureaucracy. In 2023, the average U.S. Department of Ed employee made $112,000, and the average teacher in my home state of Oklahoma made $61,000. As you know, under President Trump, the department was the smallest cabinet-level agency, but controlled the sixth largest budget. I would like you to, maybe in more detail, describe some of the reforms you're implementing to cut waste, fraud, and abuse at the department and return education to the states. And particularly, I want to make it very clear, you said something in a previous response that I think is worth noting, and that is you are not eliminating Title I-A funding and you are not eliminating IDEA funding, which is important to students and families in my state. But can you elaborate a little bit on what you're looking at restructuring for the Department of Ed?
Certainly. Well, first of all, we did look at numbers of employees we had at the Department of Education, and based on the fact that we are looking to wind down the department, we started looking at, was there overlap in the number of people that we had? So we did reduce the department by about half, but we brought some back when we really evaluated all of our programs. I think we've looked at them very carefully. We wanted to make sure we had the right number of people doing the right number of jobs. We are doing that. We are delivering on all of our statutorily required programs. We haven't missed a beat on those. And so I'm happy to report that. And so I think that was a big thing. But when you also look at rent, when you look at utilities, when you look at building space, we've decreased that footprint. So we're having savings there. But other ways we're looking at savings. We have examined some of the contracts. One of the things we've talked about here are the NAEP scores, the Nation's Report Card. And I want to assure everyone the NAEP scores are going to continue. The contracts are in place to take us through the next 4 or 5 years. It is important to have a national report card. But what we found out in looking at all of the IES contracts was that we were spending about $1 billion a year on programs and contracts and surveys and research that stayed on the shelves in schools. Teachers didn't use them. Other superintendents didn't use them. So we've taken a good close look at that, and as we enter into the new contracts, we've cut that by over 40% already. So that is one big cost savings, and those are the kinds of things we're doing. We're taking a look at what has just been kind of status quo. We can no longer have status quo.
Thank you for that. And one quick other point I want to bring up, and I don't think we have time for a full response, but under the Biden administration, there were 2,500 anti-Semitic incidents on college campuses and K through 12 schools. I have a friend who lives here in the Washington, D.C. metro area. His daughters were attending a public school. They are Jewish. They were targeted by other students. The public school did nothing. And they were forced to remove their children from that public school and put them in a private school. So I hope you will continue to fight to stand up for our friends so that they don't continue to see this anti-Semitic rhetoric across the country in schools. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Mr. Pocan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and
May I
thank you,
just-
Madam Secretary. No, I think it's my question time, if I can.
I thought I had a few
They'll
more
start the
seconds.
clock. I just don't want to lose my clock.
Oh.
And if we could do short-term answers rather than long-term ones too, that'd be helpful, just because I got a lot I'd like to talk about. Let's talk about
some
waste,
need
fraud, and abuse a
explanation.
little more, about DOGE. So you fired 1,300 people. Another 600 people took Elon Musk's deferred resignation offer. Did you fire the people, or did DOGE fire the people? I'm not completely clear on that.
Most, excuse me, most of that restructuring happened under the acting.
Short-term, did you fire or did DOGE fire?
Well, I'm going to tell you who I fired.
I know, but that's why I'm trying to get short-term
So
questions.
the
It's
short
one or
term
the
is-
other,
well,
right?
You're using our time.
Yeah.
So we, most of that was done before I came on board. However, the
DOGE.
decisions in the department I run the department. DOGE does not run the
Okay,
department.
so you didn't answer the question. Did you fire them or did DOGE? It's real simple.
A good majority of that happened before I came on board.
Okay, by a good majority, 2/3, 3/4?
But yes, I'd say.
Okay, fair, okay. And how many times did you meet with Elon Musk
I've
about
met
firing?
with Mr. Musk probably 3 to 4 times now.
Okay,
Not including when I was on the transition committee and had several opportunities to speak with him.
sure. And then if I understand it right, on your Department of Education employee roster, you have right now at least is about 16 DOGE employees, is that correct right now, working with you?
I can get back to you to the exact number. I don't think it's that high. But we
Okay.
do have, they are employees. Those that we have are employees of the federal
And
government.
when you did their background checks to see how they're qualified about education, how many had undergraduate degrees and how many had graduate degrees in
I
education?
can get back to you on that.
Okay, so you don't know offhand?
No,
Did you ask that question?
no.
No, okay. Did you ask if any of them were teachers previously?
I did not interview those people that are part of the
Okay.
DOGE group.
And did you ask if any of them worked in schools? Did you know if they were
Actually, I had a
asked?
conversation with one of them yesterday who did have a background in education, technology education, and had worked across several different aspects and was really schooling me a little bit on some of the AI things that we could bring in.
So one of them had a good background, good. Any of them work in universities that you know of prior?
I don't know.
Okay. Fair enough. So part of my concern is, I know yesterday there was this big splash, Elon Musk is stepping back. We call that horse hockey where I come from, right? We know it's not real. He's in the back closet. I understand you guys don't want his, front and center, but he's still in the room. And he's still making a lot of these decisions. And that's the real problem that I have is, you've got a bunch of folks that he brought in that you've admitted you didn't hire, you don't know their backgrounds, if they have anything in education, yet they're helping you fire half of your employees right now. And I'm really concerned about that. Do you know if any of them have requested or gained access to any sensitive data held by the department, including student loan borrower data?
Well, as government employees now, they have been vetted through the same process than any other government employee would. And so what access would be granted to other
They
government
would have.
employees, they
Okay,
have.
That's fine. And then, do you know the number of people that you've had to reinstate of those fired?
It's about 74.
About
Yeah.
74. So how did that happen? Because, I've been an employer for 37 years. The dumbest thing I could possibly do is fire someone just to rehire them, right? Because you've given them no job security. It's like beyond stupid, right? Not saying that because you didn't do it. Clearly, it sounds like this is from Elon Musk. But how did that happen, that people got fired and no one thought of you might need them? in the
Well,
department?
some of that did happen when I returned.
Okay.
Now, I was in the private sector. I have done restructuring in firms, and it's painful to do that.
Yeah, but
And
fire
you-
people
wait,
to
no,
rehire them?
well, here's the thing.
Like, usually that's not a strategy.
When you are restructuring in a company, you hope that you're just cutting fat. Sometimes you cut a little in the muscle, and you realize it as you're continuing with your programs, and you can bring people back to do that.
Yeah,
So
or
that's
you
what
can
we
plan
did.
ahead and not fire people to rehire them, right? That would be another strategy that I think is more often used. Would you agree?
Well, I'm saying that I have been on both sides of that coin, and I found them both to be effective.
Okay, interesting. We have a different perspective on that, but maybe the world of all-star wrestling is different than my world of business to business. You talked about, and I agree with you about contracts enriching private contractors at public expense. Does Elon Musk have any contracts with the Department of Education?
First of all, I just need
It's a simple
to-
question,
well,
please.
not
This
that I
is
know
my
of.
time. I have 38 seconds, please,
Well,
Madam
I don't know
Secretary.
if he does or not.
You don't know if Elon Musk has any contracts in your department, and you've met with him multiple times?
Elon Musk doesn't have contracts in my department.
So Department of Education, there are no contracts with any Elon Musk company. That's what I'm asking.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. All right. You want to check a blue card real quick, or are you pretty sure of that?
I said not to my knowledge.
Okay.
If I find out differently, I'll be happy to get back to you.
All right. And just in the last few seconds I have, just real quick on private schools getting public dollars, just so you know, something like 3/4 of the students that wind up going into those schools already attend those schools, and they're getting tax money. So if we get rid of the Department of Education, should we put the private voucher program under Ways and Means, because it's really more of a tax benefit than an education benefit?
Well, I'm happy to get back to you on that as to how we restructure the Department of Education going forward and how those programs are handled.
Great. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Secretary.
You're welcome.
Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Madam Secretary, for being here. Typical line of questioning. Someone's a little obsessed with one guy. That's interesting. It's every hearing now. So thank you so much for being here. I did want to, just for the committee, highlight a program that I stood up in the state of West Virginia. It's called the Hope Scholarship Program when I was state treasurer of West Virginia. It was actually one of the most expansive ESA programs in the country. We offered our per pupil student funding formula, state money obviously,